My topic today. And of course, there's many things to look at it. Many things. I'm trying to squeeze it into a few ways of looking at it. Yeah. And let me first make like a comparison. If we look at a fish, a living fish, he's living in an ocean. Yeah. Is he aware of the ocean? I mean, is he aware of the environment he's living in? Yeah. He's just living in there. He might be conscious if he jumps out and back in, then, yeah. But if he doesn't do that, then he's just living in an ocean. Yeah. Now that ocean is interesting comparison. Why? Because the ocean has waves. Yeah. And who was there last year in the conference? Okay. So there I started to speak about waves. I got a nickname after that. The ocean has waves. Now, let's see. What about us? Yeah. In which ocean are we living? That we probably are not conscious of. Yeah. Yeah. And in the Orient, they call that the ocean of consciousness. Yeah. The ocean of consciousness. Yeah. That means we're all the time in consciousness, we just might not be aware of it. Yeah. To make another comparison, like what is the amount of waves in this room? Well, how about the radio waves here? How many programs are going on here? Yeah. Yeah. How about television waves? Yeah. How about telephone waves? Yeah. That means this is an ocean of waves, and it's like as thick, you may say, as the ocean. It's just, since we're in it, we don't see that, we're just swimming in it. So this is an ocean full of waves. It might need some time to adapt to that idea, but it's full of waves. And even on a technical level, we already know that it's full of waves. Yeah. Now a wave moves, of course, like a wave. Huh? Just like in the ocean, everything moves like a wave. Huh? And of course, on another level, let's say we can compare it to, if we want to see what we call visible reality, yeah, that's what we usually are looking at, visible reality. That means we're using our senses, yeah, to be able to look at what we think is reality. Yeah. So we use our senses. Yeah. Then when you, especially this kind of weather, when you look very fixed to the sky, then what do you see? Ever noticed? Some people, after looking in a fixed way to the sky, they think I have a problem with my eyes. Yeah. And they go to the ophthalmologist because they think I have a problem with my eyes because I see all the time this. What do they see? They see photons. Yeah. And the photons is like, they go like this, and that means they appear and they disappear. That's an interesting observation, you see. That means, the photon is what? The photon is the particle. Yeah. And the particle appears. That means the wave, because light has two different aspects. Yeah. And that is a wave and a particle, but it's both. So the wave coagulates or collapses, you can also say that. And when it's collapsed, then it appears as a photon. See? And then the photon doesn't last long. It goes again back in the wave. And so you may say you have a yin part of light and you have a yang part of light. Yang in the sense that it appears as a particle, yeah, condensed, but from a different point of view, which is for instance used in Oriental medicine, yeah, then they say, well, the wave is fast, so you can say yang, yeah, and then it coagulates, that means it becomes frozen and then appears as a particle. And then again the other way around. So that movement from wave to particle is an interesting movement, because what is the wave? Yes, it appears, if we look at the level of light, then it's a light wave that turns into a light particle. Yeah. But that's generally what happens with all the things that we cannot see. That means it has a wave, and the wave turns into something that we would call, with our senses, visible, yeah, and then it disappears again. Yeah. You know that what you can see with your eyes is limited. What is the speed? Like for instance, if you go to the movie theater, you can see a movie, then where can you still see, up to what speed can you still see, that is, the movie is just made of all different images. Yeah. And as soon as you go above 24 per second, you cannot see it anymore. It looks like a movie. It means you see the movement, but it's all images. And even between the images, there's something like holes in between. You see? Yeah. So what appears to our eyes is not really like the movie. I mean, it appears like the movie, but it is not really like the movie. That means it's like an image that appears and disappears, and then you have next image that appears and disappears. Yeah. That appearing and disappearing, or you may look at another comparison. You know, a stroboscope. Stroboscope is sending out light, yeah, with an interval. So you have light, darkness, light, darkness, light, darkness, light, darkness, light, darkness. But when the speed of the stroboscope is higher, what do you see? Only light. You see? You don't see that the light disappears. Yeah. Now that applies to the whole reality. It appears and disappears. And that you can find in Micho's teachings, and you can find it in Oshawa's teachings, and you can find it in what is called nowadays advanced science. Well, advanced, it's already there for about 100 years, it's called quantum physics. So they explain that things appears and disappears with a very high speed so that you don't see it. Yeah? You don't see that the universe disappears and reappears, because it's at infinite speed, you see. So fast, like a stroboscope would be like all the time sending with a higher speed. You don't see the interval anymore. But from light, it's interesting to learn that, or to get the image, you see. Okay, light, faster, faster, faster. You don't see the other part of the reality, which is the disappearance of reality. Now, what is a wave? It's, of course, a form. And a wave has amplitude, we call it, but very important is a wave has frequency. Yeah? All waves have frequencies. Yeah. That means the speed by which they move. Speed is how much distance they cover in a certain amount of time. You see? And so we have the frequency of light. Now in general, all waves have a frequency. There's an enormous amount, you may say, an infinite amount of waves, so there is an infinite amount of possibilities of speed. Yeah. Now, if we look at a wave in general, then what is this part? Yeah, it appears like a wave, but what has it? Well, waves have energy, you can say. It's a form of energy. So the energy changes into a particle. Now energy is, let's say, a word that doesn't give much clarity. Yeah? Every wave carries what? We call it information. Okay. So every wave has information. Yeah. That's an interesting word, because it means it goes into a form. Information. It goes into a form. Yeah? Just like here, the light wave goes into a form and appears as a particle. You see? Then of course it goes back. Now, for the people in the Orient, the Far Orient especially, and also you may say the Far West, yeah? They don't call it energy, they don't call it information, they call it
Ki.
no, that's energy. They call it spirit. They call it spirit. So it means they look at everything as spirit. Yeah. That's why they speak about the spirit of the air, and the spirit of the water, and the spirit of the stone, and the spirit of a glass, or the spirit of the machine. Doesn't matter. It's all, for them, it's all spirit. Like you were mentioning this morning, oh, consciousness might already be there before. Well, let's say American Indians' point of view, and some of the Southern Americans Indian point of view, and the Far East point of view is everything is spirit. Yeah. Or if you want to translate it, everything is energy, yeah? Or everything is ki, or everything is information. That's just different words for the same thing. Yeah. So what is it carrying? You may say all waves are carrying spirit. So that you can understand whatever collapses, yeah, whatever it is, even a little grain of sand, yeah, is a collapsed form of spirit, you see. Or you may say a collapsed form of what we call consciousness. Yeah. Everything. There's no exception, you see. So dividing things between dead things and alive things, to that point of view, doesn't make any sense, you see. It's just a division. Because what you consider as alive and not alive, yeah, everything. So every cell, yeah, whatever cell it is, like primitive cells, like viruses and bacteria, which are, by the way, much more primitive than amoebas. They have all spirit, you see. They have all consciousness. A grain of sand at the beach, every grain of sand has consciousness. Yeah. That means they have in themselves capacities, yeah, which of course are different from human beings. But you can divide their capacities, even of a grain of sand, as soon as it's something collapsed, yeah, then everything has the different aspects that we could even see in the human being. You see, that means that every grain of sand, we could call it, well, since it's collapsed consciousness, it means it has some activity, what we would call nervous system activity. Of course, it doesn't look like our nervous system, yeah, but it has nervous system activities. Now, of course, that's a concept that's not difficult for the American Indians, neither for the Oriental people, but that's a kind of difficult for us, because we all the time make that division between life and not alive, or conscious or not conscious, which is, to the original, long time existing point of view on life, doesn't make any sense, you see. For them it's not like that. Everything is spirit. There's no exception. Whatever appears is a form of collapsed spirit, or collapsed consciousness. So you can understand this is full of consciousness, you see. So we're living like a fish in a sea of consciousness. Yeah. And it's all consciousness. Yeah. This is consciousness, that is consciousness, that is consciousness. Of course, in a different frequency. That's all. You see, it's just a different frequency. Yeah. Now, how do we get that consciousness? Well, we have a machine for that. That means our brain. Yeah. is the most fantastic organ that exists in the whole universe. You see, it's our brain. You see. So you can even see when the body develops from one cell and starts to form into a bigger form, then you see the original cell opens. Then, what is this? You see? What does that become? This part.
Spiral?
That's how it looks. What does it become? The brain and the nervous system, you see. That is the biggest development of the first cells and to, let's say, the first embryo. The main organ is not your body organs, is your brain, you see. That's the most fantastic organ that we have, you see. And of course, later on, actually starts together because you cannot divide it, but later on, the body grows, you know, from one cell. If you look at the movement of development, it goes like that, you see. You see what needs more time? The body, you see. The body needs more time before it can expand into an adult body. But what is mostly already finished, even at time of birth, you can see it. What do you have most developed? Your brain. Your nervous system is the most developed system. Yeah. And so the body develops under what? Well, there's a director here. The director is the brain. So the brain is first, you may say, finished, yeah, and then directs how the body is going to form. Why is that? Because the brain works with consciousness and the brain works with frequencies, and so the brain directs how your body is going to develop. And then it has a body, and what is then the purpose of the body? Towards the brain, all the organs are in service of the brain. Yeah. It's not the other way around. No, no. All the body organs are there to serve the brain so that the brain can function completely. Yeah. It's kind of interesting that in many forms of medicine, hardly anything they say about the brain, you see. Now it's the major organ. Yeah? It's the major organ. All the rest is in service of it. So when we look at all our 10 organs in the body, they're in service of the brain. So that the brain has what? A movement of fluid. Yeah? Yeah. The brain has a movement of its own fluid, but it also has a movement of blood. And the blood needs to provide the brain with two major things, that is oxygen and glucose. Yeah? And so all the organs are there in order to make sure that the brain can do its function. Yeah? Even in, well, the development of Oriental medicine, as soon as they started writing down things, you know, when do you start writing down things? When you're afraid to forget it. Usually you are forgotten already, you're part of it. Yes. And so, even in Oriental medicine, even Oshawa made the comparison. Huh? He said, what is left of Oriental medicine and its understanding is nothing more than one hair on the tail of the elephant. Yeah? Nothing more. That's what he said about what's written down about Oriental medicine. A hair on the tail of the elephant. That means, what about the elephant? Or even what about the tail? Yeah, yeah. So it means there's a lot of information that is lost. Yeah. Now fortunately, there's left here and there some things, and with our modern development of quantum physics, there can be reconstructed a lot of things. Just need to know how to apply it. Yeah. And of course we know the brain develops that way and the body develops that way. So they use a different form of energy, yeah, in order to be able to condense. You see, by what does the brain condense? by upgoing energy. That means earth force, you see. It becomes a very compact structure due to what? Due to upgoing energy. Just like a feminine body, a woman's body is more condensed due to more upgoing energy. So then you have heaven's energy and you have earth energy, and whatever is in between there gets squeezed, you see, because it goes like. By that, women's cells are becoming condensed. You see? Now, that's even stronger for the brain. You see? So when the brain is growing, it grows with upgoing energy and becomes enormously condensed. You see? When we look at the amount of cells, then we can look at what is the brain structure, what is the basic cell structure of the brain. We call it neurons. Now, how many do we have? Well, it's difficult to count, or to be precise, how many exactly. So they're estimate about 100 billion neurons. 100 billion neurons. Can you imagine? 100 billion. If that would be pieces of €1 each, then wow, would be an enormous weight. Then, each neuron is connected to other neurons. It's like a spider web, connected to other neurons, and the connections are made by, you probably have seen that, looks like a bone structure, but it's called synapses. And each neuron is connected to 40,000 synapses. Yeah. Oh wow. And then of course there's several parts in the brain that are more condensed. Yeah. Like for instance, if you take your nail and scratch in your small brain, which is called cerebellum, yeah, that little scratch under your nail, yeah, has more atoms than in the rest of your brain. Yeah? Just scratching here a little bit is more atoms than in the rest of your brain. Even that's enormously condensed. The cerebellum, which is called the small brain, is the most condensed part. Yeah? So that means, if that's the most condensed part, what about the information? Yeah? What about the consciousness? What about the consciousness in that area? So there's an enormous condensation, you may say, of collapsed waves. Yeah. Now, in order to understand the brain, how does the brain work with waves? It works as a receiver. Yeah. And of course it can receive waves. Yeah. It can also not only picking them up, it can also store it, can also put it somewhere. Yeah. That's all capacities of neurons, of brain cells. Yeah. In neuroscience, they know that the brain has more connections than stars in the universe. Imagine? I mean, as far as we know how many stars there is in the universe, the brain has more connections than there are stars in the universe. So, don't you think this is the most wonderful organ that we have? Huh? And it works as a receiver. That means, well, let's see a receiver like the radio. You see, the radio is a receiver. Yeah. Or your television is a receiver. What does it receive? Well, it receives waves. Yeah. Then, how do we make these waves in such a way that we can hear it or that we can see it? What do we do with the radio?
Amplify.
We tune it.
Yeah, we tune it in. Yeah, the tuner. And what do you see on the tuner, especially from the radio? Which means frequency modulation. You see? So when you modulate the frequency, you get another program. You see? So every radio station that's broadcasting, which is all gathering or moving everywhere through, yeah, if you want to catch the program, you have to put the right frequency. Otherwise, you don't hear it or you don't see it. And if you want another channel, that means another frequency, or you may say another information, yeah, or another consciousness, you have to modulate the frequency. Yeah. So whatever program that you can become conscious of just depends on how you modulate your frequency. Now on the radio and television, that's easy. Huh? You see the button, you see. Now what about the buttons here? Where are the buttons? Yeah. That means if we want to change frequency, if we want to have other information, then we need to change the frequency. Then how do we change the frequency? Well, it's exactly the same as what? As changing your consciousness. So if you change your consciousness, that means if you have, let's say, like an idea of another form of consciousness, then if you modulate into that levels of waves, then it appears in your consciousness. Yeah. To give you an example, I was sitting here in the street, yeah, under a tree, to prepare the lecture. And I said, well, I focused on it, that's the way, focused on it. Let me speak this lecture from the highest point of view that I can have at that moment. And what appeared? A kestrel. A kestrel, which is a type of falcon, you know, that hangs above the field and then is looking at things from above before it goes and catches mice, you see? So the kestrel appeared and stayed above me for a few minutes. Interesting, you see? That means I was trying to have my consciousness level on a level point of above, and it appeared. Why does it appear? Because I was on that wavelength. See? So that's how people change their consciousness, and then you see the things differently. So the buttons is the problem. You have to raise consciousness in order to be able to have other programs. So this energy, yeah, or wave you may say, is carrying consciousness, and if you want to have it experienced, yeah, then you have to put yourself on that level of consciousness, and then you will experience it. If you don't put yourself on another level of consciousness, you won't experience it. It's there, just like here, you see, it's full of radio waves and television waves. Are you experiencing it? No. Why not? Because you're not putting the button of your frequency in order to be able to see it. So the brain is your receiver, and so in that sense, you can connect with an infinite amount of possibilities. Yeah. In quantum physics, they call that the quantum field. Now the quantum field is not invisible there. No. It's all in the form of waves. You see? Yeah. And if you want to collapse it, it means if you want to have the information, you need to put yourself on that level, otherwise you won't see it, you won't experience it, you won't feel it. You see? Yeah. Because when the brain is, let's say, if you use your brain in such a way that you modulate the frequency, then you see the program. You see? And how does the brain do it? That's interesting to know it. the midbrain. Yeah. You may say the center of the whole spiral as we study it in our macrobiotic studies. Huh? In the midbrain, what do we have in the midbrain? Well, that's the center of the receiver. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or you may say, there we have the lamp. Now, what is the lamp? What is our lamp? Our spirit. Here we have the highest concentration of what you can call the spirit. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the spirit is like a lamp radiating in all directions, activating all your neurons, activating all your brain cells. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So spirit is there. Now, let's go in detail. If we want to make divisions in the brain, yeah, and how the brain works, yeah, that is, oh, I forgot something. I go back. How the brain works in order to make something visible is using what is called focus. Focus. Yeah. Now, where do we focus? What's the area where we focus? Which area is that? Oh, well, close your eyes. Yeah. Close your eyes and turn your eyes upwards. Yeah. So close your eyes, turn your eyes upwards, inwards and upwards. Yeah. Then you may have like some kind of feeling, an experience of, oh, it's a little tight there, or there's some tension there. Yeah. That is called the frontal lobe. Yeah. And in the frontal lobe, that's where we focus. Yeah. Now you can focus or not focus. Yeah. Most people is, let's say, unconsciously focusing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's the big difference. Yeah. So if you want to change the program, then you have to focus consciously. Otherwise, it will just continue with the focus that you already had before. Mm-hmm. Now, in order to realize, or you may say, materialize, yeah, what you are focusing on, yeah, there is in the brain the cerebellum. And what is the cerebellum to your consciousness? It's called, and also in quantum physics, it's exactly called the same way. It's called the observer. Yeah. So the observer, you may say, is here. Yeah. That's where this enormous amount of neurons have, you may say, what is the enormous amount of neurons? That means it's all the information ever possible. Yeah. So you may say, this is the area in your brain, yeah, where you have all the information possible from the quantum field, which is everything possible. Yeah. That's here. And that's called, in neuroscience and quantum physics, called the observer. Now, the observer has to make symmetry. Otherwise, it won't observe anything. Yes. It has to make symmetry what you put here in your frontal lobe. Yeah. And when you make symmetry, that means, yeah, the observer has to look at what you're focusing on, and only when you succeed in that, yeah, then that is collapsed into reality. Yeah. And the reality is then going this way and then moves down, yeah, along your nervous system, yeah, and also along what we in Oriental medicine call the spiritual channel, which of course later on became the energy channel. You see, that's already a deterioration of interpretation. It was originally called the spiritual channel. And if you don't want to speak about the spirit, are afraid to speak about the spirit, becomes the energy channel. And if you're even afraid about speaking that, then it becomes the central channel. You see, that's the most physical way of looking at it. Oh, now it's in the middle, you see, the central channel. Yes, it's in the middle, more or less. Huh? So whatever you're focusing at that becomes seen by your observer, yeah, then that collapses into this and then goes down into your body, using the nervous system and the, you may say, the spiritual channel. A lot of, you may call, energy centers, huh? But they're different ones. Huh? And something that is more like spiritual, you may say, or more like energetical, yeah? It starts to activate, when it goes down, it starts to activate the glands. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And the highest control of your glands is the pituitary gland. Huh? That's the highest one. That activates then the pineal gland. Yeah? And then the pineal gland activates all the other glands in the body. And what does it become when all these glands become active? You change from information into, what do hormones do? They create your emotional experience. So then you have, by the glands, whoops, creating a lot of emotional experiences. And then the experiences are brought down so that it becomes a physical experience, or you may say a sensorial experience, what we call feeling it. But that's feeling complete, you see? That's into a complete body feeling. And so the waves, you may say, you can even say like this, water down, you see? Yeah? And activates your glands, which is, what is your glands? What do they produce? Hormones. Hormones are liquids, yeah? With a very high charge of energy, or you may say a very high charge of spirit, or you may say a very high charge of consciousness, yeah? And then they are moving, or we moving in a way that we become like feeling it emotionally. And of course, why we are here, at least to have experience, you see? And so we have emotional experience, then become a sensorial experience, and then normally in experience, what's the purpose of experience? Then you have lived it, experienced it completely. And then, what happens then? You could compare it with your digestive system. After you have extracted all the energy from it, yeah, then what do? That means it goes from up, gradually down, 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 completely physically experienced, sensorial experience. And then, what do you have to do? Eliminate it. That's where, especially Occidental people, you know, they all have intestinal problems, most of them. And so what they don't do is eliminate it. They don't stop the experience, you see? You need to have the experience and then eliminate it. Okay, that's it. But there is a purpose of experience. What's the purpose of experience? Normally, you should be able to turn your experience into wisdom. Yeah. Yeah. That's the purpose of experience, is to develop wisdom. That means, by that wisdom, you raise your consciousness. And if you raise your consciousness, you can use that in your brain to have more consciousness, you see? So based upon wisdom, yeah, you can grow more wisdom, but then you have to modulate your brain so that you can do it. But if you have wisdom, you automatically open up to more possibilities. Yeah. But, you know, if you don't do anything on the radio, nothing happens. That means if you don't modulate your frequency, nothing happens. You will stay in the frequency that you are already in. Yeah. Now, after focusing on it, there's another very important step. actually the basic step. After focusing, and most people don't know how to focus because we don't have the custom to do that, so we do it automatically. Yeah? And then what happens? Well, then we have all the results coming after that from focusing automatically instead of consciously. See? Now, after you focused and observed it, then there is a very deciding step in your brain. That is called, in the Far Eastern philosophy, it's called the guardian. The guardian. What is a guardian? Well, he's at the door, you see? Yeah. And the guardian, physically speaking, in your brain is the thalamus. That's the guardian. And the guardian, yeah, is at the door, and he will decide whether that information that you want, yeah, is allowed or not. So you can focus on whatever. If the guardian doesn't allow it, nothing would happen, you see. Now, by what the guardian is working, it's working on the consciousness level that you already have. That means what you can accept as possible, yeah, the guardian will open, you see. If you think, no, that's impossible, then it won't be your consciousness. It won't be your experience because it's not allowed, it's not accepted. So the guardian is the one who allows things to be experienced if you can accept it. And what you accept it is according to your level of consciousness that you have already. So if you want to change level of consciousness, the first thing you have to do is allow and accept the possibility that there might be a totally different reality than the one you have accepted so far. You see? Yeah. So you won't raise your consciousness in no way if you're not open to something else. Yeah. That means, or we call that, in Western style, we call that an open mind. Yeah. If you don't have an open mind, you can forget it. There's nothing going into your experience and your consciousness and understanding if you don't have an open mind. I mean, if you started macrobiotics and you said, okay, we're learning about the influence of foods. If you don't have an open mind for that point of view, it won't happen. You see. So what you allow or accept is the guardian opening the door for that information. It's like, you see, how you modulate your frequency. You see. Then, look at the enormous capacity that follows. So, when you modulate your brain and accept the new thing that you are focusing on it, yeah, what is your brain going to do? Well, it's going to attract out of the quantum field that type of information that you were focusing on. Yeah. And that goes in all directions. That means you will experience the information, yeah, and it will also appear around you because there's no difference in reality. See? So the reality we all have is the reality that is based upon what you can allow and accept in your brain. The guardian is deciding. And of course we can have then discussions. Well, discussions don't have any, you may say, don't have any sense because it will always depend on what you allow to be your reality, you see. Oh yes, you can exchange it, but you cannot change the point of view of somebody else if that person is not open to another point of view. Won't work because the person is not putting the frequency on that point of view. So you don't get it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when I used my point of view and focused on a higher point of view, you see, in my reality, the falcon appeared. Well, you see, that's how the outside reality is reflecting your inside reality. Mm-hmm. And what's doing it? Well, your consciousness using your receiver. and orienting your magnificent machine. Yeah. Now, to give some of the aspects of the brain, so we have the midbrain, and of course that activates all the glands, and all the glands go down in your body to the lowest ones. Yeah? And the lowest part in your body activates what we call our animal part. That's activating in the lowest part. And these energy centers, you know the image that the Buddhists use about energy centers? Anybody knows it? The lotus flower. Yeah, that's a symbol of an energy center. And of course, mainly they're looking at the lotus flower as the pineal gland. And what do energy centers do? Well, the information that is condensed in there, yeah, they call it unfold. You see, like a flower has to open up, unfold, and then the information that's hidden there or that's gathered there will unfold, and then you will have consciousness of that information that is there. And so, when we mature, it goes like the three lowest glands, or you may say the three lowest areas of or the Indians, the Hindu people call it chakras. Yeah. When they unfold, the information that's in there comes open, and so it becomes available to you. The first three ones do it automatically. You see? When you grow as a child, the first three ones open up, and then the information comes free. What's the lowest one? What the quality doesn't give you? The lowest one? Yeah, is how you can live. Yeah? If you have a point of view that that's difficult, then we call it survival. Oh, that's an interesting point of view. Why do you have to survive? Survive what? You see? Yeah? So you can see, if you have another modulation of your consciousness, then either becomes, oh, I have a lot of life, and I have experienced a lot of life, but I'm afraid of losing it. Then it becomes fear and survival. That's how you use the lowest gland, you see? The lowest chakra, you may say. Yeah? The second one is whether you create vitality, and if not, then you will have pain and suffering. The third one, yeah, is the plexus, and the plexus makes you aware of, if that opens up, then you have power, or no power. Then you become the abuser, yeah, and the other one becomes the abused. So you play the tyrant and the victim. That's in number 3, you see? That's why in Oriental development they say, well, real development of consciousness starts at number 4. And number 4 is the heart area. Now the heart area, if you look at it physically, it's a heart, yeah, it controls your circulatory system. But then in the front, we have you ever noticed? This is a hollow area, yeah? What is there? In the Orient, they know what's there. They call it the soul. The soul is here. And then in between, you have the gland that is the thymus gland. And then you can see, very young children have a very active thyroid gland. But if you don't open up that center of consciousness, the thymus gland dies. Becomes like, like if you look at an orchid, the withered orchid, that's how it looks, like a little just leaves and no active gland. That's why people that start to develop more active consciousness, the thymus gland starts to live again and produce hormones. And the hormones are making your cells young, making your cells living longer. And of course, when it opens up, you become aware of a totally different reality than the one you're used to. Yeah. So it depends on how you move your frequency. Now, so that's how it goes down, and from the midbrain. But the midbrain gives you, spiritually speaking, we call it knowingness. What is knowingness? It's not knowledge. It's what you really know. That means, and what we know, you can have an idea, yeah, and then when you have the idea focused on, accept it, it becomes experience, yeah, And then it becomes your truth. You see? The truth is only true for you if you experienced it. We can discuss whatever and say whatever I did. It doesn't mean anything for you unless it becomes your truth. You see? Yeah? Only when it's your truth, it's yours. Now that also means that everybody has their own truth. There is not the truth. There is only your truth, the one that you made from your consciousness into your experience. And then it becomes your truth. See? Mm-hmm. And of course, when it becomes your truth, it's only because it became your experience. It means you have felt it, experienced it, and then you can choose. Make it into wisdom or not. Now, the organ, yeah, that keeps your wisdom is your soul. That keeps your wisdom, you see? Yeah. Now, where do we have the waves? I'm going to finish it. Huh? Where do we have our waves the most deep? Well, it's called your DNA. That means you're born with certain waves. Yeah. Huh? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That means you get consciousness from your parents, grandparents, grand-grandparents. And we know in Oriental medicine is 6 generations. So that's 64 people, yeah, including you. You put your own consciousness that you have from your past lives. At least if you developed some wisdom, you only bring in the wisdom that you developed. Then that you make that into the fertilized cell, and you get the information from your parents. That's genetical influence, you see? That means that's a lot of information you have. And then you add it to it, and then you can, what you want, manipulate it into a higher consciousness. That means you get something, yeah, but you can play with it. Mm-hmm. And manipulate it so that gradually you develop higher consciousness, regardless the DNA that you got. You see? You use it, and then you use your brain in order to change it. And very important in order to change it is your soul's memory, you may say, and especially how you modulate it. Because it's also frequencies, you see? It's just materialized frequencies, and you can change them. They know, physically even in modern medicine, they know you can manipulate your DNA, so you have other forms of DNA. Yeah? And then you have other capacities. Yeah. And of course we call that genetic. Huh? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then, just to add things, in the cerebellum we have our subconscious mind. Subconscious mind is it knows everything. Yeah. It's just subconscious. Why? Because you do not put the frequency on so that you know all the knowledge. Huh? It's interesting to know that that part of the brain is not dependent on chemicals.
Not dependent
on chemicals. That means because when we have waves, the waves change into fluid form, that becomes hormones, then becomes, you may say, sensory, and sensory works with chemicals. And so you have all these chemical reactions going on in your body so that you have a physical experience. Well, that part of the brain is not chemically dependent. That's interesting, you see? It's not depending on your physical chemicals. It can do everything on its own. And it's time-wise non-local. That means it's not depending on space, and it's also not dependent on time. It's time and space free. Why not? Because what? It's the quantum field, you see? The quantum field is everything possible in time and space. Yeah. So it's controlled by what? By frequency. So it's all depending on how you use your frequency. And it's interesting, that part of your brain is detached from body and environment. Oh, of course the quantum field is detached from your body and your environment, but it can create body and environment, you see. Now this part, neocortex, the brain, yeah, you know, when we were primitive human beings, we didn't have a neocortex, yeah? We didn't have this extended part of the brain. If you look like the primitive, like Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal people, they have a brain like this, you see? This is bigger, that's bigger, and this is developed later. Probably only the last 40,000 years. yeah, that this neocortex became developed. Yeah? And then you know the advantages is that we start what? We start thinking between left and right. That means we get an appearance of duality. You see? That's what the neocortex does. And like in the discussions in the church, it was like the angel and the devil discussing with each other. That's just your left brain and your right brain discussing. Yeah. The totality of these discussions and the points of view in there we call personality. You see? So this has no personality. This is how the brain makes and creates and experiences personality. You see? And then here in the center, especially in the pineal gland, yeah, the pineal gland makes a connection with frequencies that in quantum physics they call it infrared frequencies. That's where you end up when you start to sleep. You see, boom, you end up in the night, we call it. That means it appears like obscure. You see, that. But the animals, as we were talking, or you were giving the example, that's psychic capacity that is there. That's what the animals use. You see, and the primitive people didn't have language because the language depends on that, you see. So they were communicating like the animals with psychic capacities. So psychic means, just like in your dreams, you're free in space and time. So the animals know, okay, there's going to be an earthquake and we better move away from the sea. While all the human beings, not using their infrared frequency, go to look at the sea. Oh, the sea is retracting. What's going on? And of course, then the sea comes and then they're gone, you see. While the animals are already safe because they use naturally the psychic capacity of infrared frequencies in the brain. You have much more. Infrared is just the next to the physical level, you see. And so that controls automatic body functions and is chemically dependent. Yeah. So when you make chemicals, that's going to affect especially the midbrain. Yeah. And of course, this is your personality. Look at it. I put the amount of impulses, 10 to 24 impulses per second. That is doing that part of the brain. That's enormous. And the speed, yeah, of how it moves into your neurons is 432 kilometers per second. Can you imagine? 432 kilometers per second. That's how the information moves. Yeah. And then we become conscious of that if we focused on it and if we allowed it. So whatever we are expressing is of course our, we call it points of view. Yeah. But that's what you have been focusing on. And what will be your reality is just on what you have been focusing on and what you allow to be reality for you. See? Okay. Now, one more thing. Just to show you. People knew that in the past. And especially people that went to schools, yeah, where they were teaching that. And one of them is Michelangelo, you see? Of course, in the church you cannot say it, but you can show it. Now look, where the divine spirit, or you may call it God, whatever, where is the God? Look at it. How does that look? Brain. That is the brain. You see? So your divine spirit and your capacity to deal with the quantum field and create your reality is in the brain. He showed it. You see? So if you want to create your life, you have to use your brain and your divine capacities. Thank you.